as we go forward. Our sermon for today is going to be taken from the book of Habakkuk. So if you'd like to turn there, it's towards the end of the Old Testament, just before we get to good old Matthew and start into the New Testament. So if you'll like to look through your minor prophets, you'll find Habakkuk right between Nahum and Zephaniah. We're going to be looking at the first two chapters of that book today. The third chapter is labeled as the prayer of Habakkuk the prophet, and it is really a kind of Hebrew poetry. It's quite a lovely piece of text unto itself, but it's not going to be the subject of our lesson today. I would assign that to you as homework. Take some time to look at that this afternoon once you get home. It will relate directly to what we're talking about, but it doesn't fit in our time frame of what we're going to have time to talk about. You know, one of the things about this book is that it's sometimes, like many of the Old Testament prophets, hard to grab a hold of, look at, and find out how to apply it to ourselves. The New Testament's great about that. The applications are usually pretty direct. This is the way Christians ought to behave. This is something Jesus did, and we can emulate, and things like that. And a few bad examples sprinkled in for good measure. With the Old Testament, sometimes it's a little bit harder to wrap our brains around it and make it into something practical and useful. I hope as we're looking at this oracle, which God is giving to Habakkuk, we can learn a little bit about God's character and about also how we can see some of the things that happen in the world around us. As we're starting, keep in mind that this oracle is to the people of Judah at the time of the divided kingdom against the Chaldeans, a group of people who were punishing the people of Judah on God's behalf. They were evil people, but they were appointed to the task of carrying out some wickedness on the people of Judah because of Judah's transgressions. The oracle which Habakkuk the prophet saw. How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you will not hear? I cry out to you violence, and yet you do not save. Why do you make me see iniquity and cause me to look on wickedness? Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists and contention arises. Therefore the law is ignored and justice is never upheld. For the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore justice comes out of the word. We can see the initial cry of Habakkuk here as he asks the Lord for guidance. Why are all these bad things happening? What is it that I am seeing, and why should it be this way? Here comes the response. Look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder. Because I am doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that fierce and impetuous people, who march throughout the earth to seize dwelling places which are not theirs. They are dreaded and feared. Their justice and authority originate with themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, and keener than wolves in the evening. The horsemen come galloping. The horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle swooping down to devour. All of them come for violence. Their horde moves, faces forward. They collect captives like sand. They mock at kings, and rulers are a laughing matter to them. They laugh at every fortress and heap up rubble to capture it. Then they will sweep through in the wind and pass on. But they will be held guilty, they whose strength is their God. You can see that the picture that's being painted here is that these wicked people are being used to punish wickedness. God has turned the tides of an evil army against the wayward people and is using them to wreak this havoc among the people who need the punishment. It's not that God himself is assenting to their violence, or to their evil, but that the results of their actions are fitting for those who are receiving the results of their actions. They are the ones who are acting sort of on his behalf. But the last verse brings in the punchline there. Did you catch that? They will sweep through like the wind, they will pass on, but they will be held guilty. They whose strength is their God. And a little bit earlier on in the passage, it says that their justice and authority originate with themselves. The Chaldeans are themselves being set up for their own eventual punishment because of their arrogance and their idolatry, it's almost framed as. That their strength is their God, their military might, their ability to prove their right by violence and by force is the thing that they hold in highest regard, and they will be brought low for that. They will be held guilty for their actions. And we can see here, there's almost sort of a glowing description, right? These guys are almost getting some good press, that their horses are swifter than leopards and keener than wolves in the evening. These are fierce warriors. But really, all of that is to say that justice is coming for them, just as they are being used to conduct justice. The other thing I would like to draw out of there, as we are looking at this, is that this is a picture of how God's character is framed against the actions of people. Now, men can conduct themselves in however way they see fit. They can make justifications for whatever they want. They can find a wrong and punish it and call it justice. But God is not like that. Verse 12. Are you not from everlasting, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? We will not die. You, O Lord, have appointed them to judge, and you, O Rock, have established them to correct. Your eyes are too pure to approve evil, and you cannot look on wickedness with favor. Why do you look with favor on those who deal treacherously? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those who are more righteous than they? Why have you made men like the fish of the sea, like creeping things without a ruler over them? The Chaldeans bring all of them up with a hook. They drag them away with a net. They gather them in their fishing net. Therefore they rejoice and are glad. Therefore they offer a sacrifice to their net and burn incense to their fishing net. Because through these things their catch is large and their food is plentiful. Will they therefore empty their net and continually slay nations without sparing? So we can see that Habakkuk, in speaking, returning the call of the Lord, is saying that he knows that the Lord is just, he knows that he will not approve of evil. So why is it that we're having to go through this violence that's being brought on us by the Chaldeans? And we can see more of that idolatry language here too. They're offering incense, they're offering a sacrifice to their net. The tools by which they reap great bounty are themselves gods to the Chaldeans. Listen to this next part here too, where the prophet is now portraying himself to us, and he is waiting on the message of the Lord. I will stand on my guard post and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will speak to me, and how I may reply when I am reproved. So that verse in particular, I would like to take a moment to look at. As we saw in just we'll see in just a few verses, God is going to deliver a message for all of the people. But Habakkuk himself is not holding himself separate and apart from the wicked people. A lot of times, the prophets will be like Noah, that we looked at recently, the one good guy in a sea of evil, right? The one good person who is sort of replying to God because he's the only person God's found worthy of receiving his message. But then we see other people, like Isaiah, who says, I'm a man of unclean lips among people of unclean lips. And we see Habakkuk here saying, I'm ready to receive your correction, God. You tell me what I've done wrong. You give me this reproof, and I will listen to what you have to say. But God's response is not directed at Habakkuk. It's not directed at him for his wrongdoing. Instead, he says this, verse 2. The Lord answered me and said, record the vision and inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hastens towards the goal that it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it, for it will certainly come, and it will not delay. He said, write this like it's a signpost, set it up so everybody can see that it's a warning, get away from here, danger is coming. Verse 4, behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith. Furthermore, wine betrays the haughty man, so that he does not stay at home. He enlarges his appetite with Sheol, and he is like death, never satisfied. He also gathers to himself all nations and collects to himself all people. Will not all of these take up a taunt song against him, even mockery and insinuations against him, and say, woe to him who increases what is not his, for how long? And makes himself rich with loans? Will not your creditors rise up suddenly, and those who collect when you awaken? Indeed, you will become a plunder for them. Because you have looted many nations, and all the remainder of the peoples will leave you, because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, to the town, and all its inhabitants. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to put his nest on high, to be delivered from the hand of calamity. You have devised a shameful thing for your house, by cutting off many peoples. So you are sinning against yourself. Surely the stone will cry out from the wall, and the rafter will answer it from the framework. We'll continue that in just a moment as the theme continues, but I'd like to take some time to look at a few parts of this that we have looked at so far. In God's immediate part of his response to Habakkuk, he says that all bad things will end. We have an understanding of this just because of the nature of the world. Nothing lasts forever. If a man created it, he will have it end. And that is true of many things. How many traditions have died off in the church, even though they were created with the good intentions of a Christian person? And how many nations, even though they were led by good people for a long time, have fallen in corruption and ruin and crumbled? Anything that a person makes will have its end. But more importantly, God says, you don't have to worry about what that end is. He says that it is going to move on towards its goal and without fail because God has a plan. It will certainly come. It will not delay. Further, in encouraging the good people of Judah against these unrighteous Chaldeans, he says, as for the proud one, his soul's not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith. The one who trusts in God and lives by faith doesn't have to worry about the future because he knows that God has it secured and that the unrighteous will come to ruin. More to the point, and something that I think we may find some relevance in our modern times, is that all of this unrighteous gain that the Chaldeans have got is from borrowing and lending and from taking from others to enrich themselves. And eventually the creditors are going to come knocking. Chaldeans didn't earn anything on their own. He says they went around and they borrowed, and eventually that's going to come due. And when the bill gets to them, when it's time to pay the piper, the Chaldeans will not be able to put enough resources together to make up what they owe. In fact, the problem is going to be so big that the people that they have oppressed are going to start mocking them. Oh, well, now you don't have the money all of a sudden? Big man, you're in trouble all of a sudden? Where's all that power you had? Where are your armies? Where are your riches? All of these things that the Chaldeans were relying on were all temporary, and it was all going to come to an end. I think we can see many people who have, in this time, just as in other times in human history, got a lot by evil gain, by exploitation, and by borrowing and begging and hoping that the creditors don't come knocking. And that may be coming for some people sooner rather than later. But there is something here that I want us to draw out in particular. Why would somebody do something so wicked? Why would they exploit other people? Why would they, use debt to such an evil degree, not just to secure themselves, but to take from others? Why would somebody do something so wicked? The problem with this action is that the very root of it, the initial desire, is not wrong. The problem is that their pride got in the way of understanding how to achieve what that desire was. Listen to verse 9. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to put his nest on high, to be delivered from the hand of calamity. The Chaldeans were not just doing evil because they were bad people, because they were the enemies of God, because they were somehow morally bankrupt from the beginning. A lot of people will oversimplify the Bible, and they'll see people who are the enemies of Israel, and they will automatically say, well, they're the only bad guys because the Jewish people were the ones writing the story. And if you ask the Chaldeans, they would have said they were the good guys. But listen to what is happening here. It wasn't just that the Chaldeans wanted to secure their own. It wasn't just that they wanted to protect themselves, which would have been within their normal course of events. Now, I won't say rights, because I'm not really sure that there was even such a concept at the time as rights. But the idea that a people would want to protect themselves, or even an individual would want to protect himself from harm from others, is not wrong. That is not evil. The problem was that they turned to exploitative practices to tearing down others in order to achieve that. They wanted to put their nest on high to be delivered from calamity. Well, so did the people that they were destroying to do that for themselves. We all want to be safe. But for the Christian, that safety cannot come at the expense of other people. We have to be people of faith who will wait on the Lord and on His plans. God provides both the punishment and the reward. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed, this is verse 12, and founds a town with violence. Is it not indeed from the Lord of hosts that peoples toil for fire and that nations grow weary for nothing? God is punishing the wicked, he says, by giving them fruitless work to do, because they have unjust motives, because they are behaving in an evil way. They're going to just keep working and working and receive nothing. Everything that they work for will be burnt up, and they will receive no rewards for their work. Verse 14, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. That is the ultimate goal of all the peoples of the world, is that we will know God and know that He is the one who provides, and He is the one who keeps those gifts away from some. Woe to you who make your neighbors drink, who mix your venom even to make them drunk, so as to look on their nakedness. You will be filled with disgrace rather than honor. Now you yourself drink and expose your own nakedness. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter disgrace will come upon your glory. For the violence done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and the devastation of its beasts by which you terrified them, because the human bloodshed and the violence done to the land, to the town, and all its inhabitants. What profit is the idol when its maker has carved it, or an image, a teacher of falsehood? For its maker trusts his own handiwork when he fashions speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a piece of wood, awake, to a mute stone, arise. And that is your teacher? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver. There is no breath inside it. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. Now, if you took 18 through 20 out of context, you might be convinced that that was just sort of a little treatise against idolatry. Say, don't you make any little statues and pray to them, all you naughty little boys. That's not what's happening here, is it? We already talked about idolatry in this passage. The idolatry that these people were perpetrating was the idolatry that came from trusting in their own strength and working towards the goal of enriching themselves. In verse 11 of chapter 1, we saw that their strength is their God. In verse 16 of chapter 1, we saw that they offer sacrifice and burn incenses to their fishing nets. In that metaphor, the fishing net was the tools by which they reap good for themselves and take from others. And then on in verse 18 through 20, as we have just read, we see idolatry again. So what is the idolatry? What are these idols that they're overlaying with gold? What is the real picture here? The person who trusts in their own strength and props themselves up and says, well, I'm the smart one, I'm the wise one, I've taught myself. We'll learn when God teaches it how wrong it is. If you look at an idol of stone or wood and you say, this is my teacher, you're going to learn, because the fruits of your own labor will come back empty. They will be reduced to fire. They will be nothing, as we saw in verse 12 of chapter 2. So if we see the God who provides punishment and reward, and we see that the idolater gets the punishment, it is the person of faith who gets the reward. The Habakkuk's oracle, his message for us today, is to continue to be people of faith, and to make sure that that faith is properly placed. Don't trust in your own strength, and definitely don't trust in your own ability to do violence. If you can only get good by making sure that others get bad, you've done wrong. And, church, that probably sounds like the simplest story in the world. That might sound like something that you would tell a child. Now, if you can only get something for yourself by hurting somebody else, it's bad. But people haven't learned the lesson. We're still here thousands of years after Habakkuk's book was written, and people still haven't learned this lesson. So the important thing for us as spiritual people is to teach it, but not necessarily through our words. The person of faith will proclaim the word of God like it's a permanent marking stone, like Habakkuk. But he will also conduct himself in the way that God instructs. What did Habakkuk get as that first part of that reply that he got in verse 2 of chapter 2? Record the vision and inscribe it on tablets, so the one who reads it may run. If God is warning you, don't go this way, this is the way wicked people go, you turn and you run the other way. And that's really what repentance is. The God of mercy offers repentance for us as a way out of having evil done to us and doing evil to others. So, if you haven't repented today, and then you'd like to avail yourself of that opportunity, we traditionally like to offer this time so that you can come forward for baptism, for prayers, or anything else we can do for you as a congregation. And we would offer that you take advantage of this opportunity now as we stand.